What's going on, guys? So this is going to be the first of hopefully many educational styles of video on the channel, and I decided to kick it off with muscle fiber composition. For those of you that don't know, I got my bachelor's degree in kinesiology, and as part of that we were required to do a thesis, basically like a 25 to 30 page paper, and I chose to do it on muscle fiber composition, genetics, and athletic performance. So although I don't have my PhD or I'm not a geneticist or anything like that, I did want to kind of delve into this topic a little bit and give you guys some quality information. Hopefully you guys can take something away from it, and hopefully I won't be too boring and I can make this video as concise and short and sweet as possible. So to start things off, let's take a closer look at the anatomy of a muscle. In the upper left corner, you're going to see something that's called a muscle belly. That's basically the meaty part, the big part, the chunk of the muscle. And that's further divided into several fascicle bundles. And those fascicles, within those are a bunch of single muscle fibers, and in those muscle fibers is where you have the myofibrils. It's a lot of words, a lot of technical words, but that's essentially what your muscle fiber is that tiny little myofibril. So within each of these rod-like myofibril structures are something called sarcomeres, and that's what you see at the top right of the screen, and that's actually where the contraction theory comes from, the theory for what controls a muscle contraction. It's called a sliding filament theory, and that's beyond the scope of this video. It's not really what I want to talk about. But just so you guys know, that's the furthest and smallest level that the muscle anatomy is divided into. So in the human body, we have three types of muscle fibers. We have type 1, type 2, and type 2X. Type 1 are the slow twitch muscle fibers. These are used for more endurance sports like a long run, a marathon, any like a run that's longer than 400 meters, pretty much any kind of long distance activity. And the type 2A fibers are kind of like intermediate in between fibers, and these are used for more like probably like a 400 meter run, maybe a 200 meter run. Also, these are probably recruited more in weightlifting and like bodybuilding if you're doing a higher rep range. And lastly, we have the type 2X, which are your fast twitch muscle fibers, and these are mostly recruited in explosive like sprint performance activities, and more so in, if you were to test 1 rep max, these are the muscle fibers that you're primarily recruiting. It's important to note, however, that during any physical activity, you're going to recruit all three, but the extent of which muscle fiber you're recruiting most depends on, the velocity of the movement and the duration of the activity. So as a side note, it's important to point out that there are three types of energy systems in the human body. There's the aerobic system, the glycolysis, and creatine phosphagen system. Type 1 fibers are going to be used for aerobic activities. Type 2A fibers are going to be used in the glycolysis and metabolic pathway, and type 2X fibers are going to be used in the creatine phosphagen pathway. And that's pretty much in a nutshell why people take creatine, is because that is the metabolic system that's used for performing a strength or powerlifting movement, a really explosive movement, is that creatine phosphagen system where you're using your type 2X fibers. So why is it important to study this stuff? First of all, for athletic performance, as kinesiologists, as recreational enthusiasts, we enjoy performing, exercising, and training. So there's a huge component to that. You want to know what's going on inside of your body and how your muscles are actually reacting to certain stimuluses. And it can also have a certain effect on diet and disease, muscular dystrophy. In the medical, in the medical world, they do take samples of your muscle fibers, some biopsies, and they do perform studies and findings and do research to kind of diagnose certain diseases. And that kind of leads me into measurement of how we actually measure and analyze muscle fiber composition. So basically what happens is a local anesthesia is applied to a certain muscle, and for a lot of researchers, a lot of the studies that I found, they use the vastus lateralis. It's your outside, it's the lateral part of your quad muscle, the outside part of like the quad sweep, I guess, if you want to think about it in terms of bodybuilding, because that's historically across the general population a 50-50 equally distributed muscle in terms of muscle fiber composition. It's 50% slow twitch, 50% fast twitch. So that way they'll prevent bias. They'll look at anyone's vastus lateralis and think, okay, this muscle should be fairly proportionate in terms of slow twitch and fast twitch composition. A good thing to point out is that muscles like the gastrocnemius, it's primarily used for explosive activities like jumping. In the gastric in particular, I find a higher distribution of type 2X fibers, which makes sense because it's used for explosive activities. So that's another reason why it's important to look at the vastus lateralis, because It's not quite a fast twitch, quote unquote fast twitch, and it's not quite a quote unquote slow twitch muscle. So after they take that biopsy, they'll send that off to a lab, and the lab, in the lab they'll stain it. Scientists will stain it, and they'll stain certain fibers different colors, and they'll be able to look at the slide, the microscopic slide, and determine which muscle fibers are slow twitch and fast twitch based on a bunch of different characteristics and properties. So when I decided to write my thesis, I wanted to answer the question, can muscle fiber composition be genetic? And to give you guys the short answer, the answer is yes. Some people are more genetically inclined, and they're born with innate traits to have a certain distribution of muscle composition. So this was one of the first studies that I found that was done. It's a fairly old study, but that goes to show you that this stuff has been studied for a while. And what they did is they took a look at 3 groups of siblings. The first was a monozygotic, that's identical twins. Dizygotic is fraternal twins, and just brother pairs, and they examine their vastus lateralis muscles. So just a reference point, identical twins have the same exact DNA, fraternal twins have pretty similar DNA, and brother pairs will have certain DNA that are still the same. And what they found was that the identical twins had the least variance between slow twitch muscle fiber composition percentage. So that basically means that across the board all the twins had the same composition of slow twitch compared to the fraternal twins and the brother pairs. And that indicates that there's a strong genetic component in terms of muscle fiber composition. And there's a bunch of factors that could influence this, diet, training level, physical activity level, as you can see, and even intrauterine development, how the fetuses develop in the uterus. So this was their breakdown that they kind of decided on. 45% was genetic variance, 40% was environmental, and 50% was just sampling and technical variance. So my goal with this is I want to kind of share all the information that I learned from my research, from my thesis, with you guys, and to show you guys and define what exactly genetics is in terms of bodybuilding, powerlifting, athletic performance, because we hear it a lot on YouTube, but no one actually talks about what it actually is, and that kind of alludes to the next video that I'm going to put out hopefully relatively soon after this one goes up. So I hope you guys learned something, or at least you're somewhat interested in learning about genetics and muscle fiber composition. And there's a bunch of factors that influence how successful you are at a sport. Let's take powerlifting, for example. There's neural efficiency, training, diet, nutrition, programming, a whole bunch of things. But I think muscle fibers are, that's what's doing the work. That's where the contraction and the force is taking place. So I think that's a good place to start. And not saying this is the end-all, be-all. This is what's going to determine if you're meant for powerlifting or not, or you're meant for a certain sport or not. But it's a good place to start. So if you guys like the video, make sure to go ahead and like it and leave a comment, and I'll hopefully get that next video up where I delve into genetics a little bit more. And thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.